We're in the end game now. This won't be the last time I talk to you about figurines that don't actually exist, but it is the last time for this series. Hello everyone, MMC Fan here, and welcome to the final installment of What If I Were in Charge of the Marvel Movie Collection. Over the past few months, I've been going through the choices I would have made for the full 140 figures in the collection. Eagle Moss did some great work, but they didn't always produce what their fans wanted, and it's been great fun tweaking their lineup to make it even more exciting. This final video looks at issues 121 through to 140. This was of course the final extension, and where Eagle Moss decided to do Powerless Doctor Strange, Prison Star-Lord, Tony Stark in a tracksuit, Vision in a coat, and other complete duds. But I've left enough big hitters to the end to finish with a bang. Let's get started with issue 121. So we kick off with Queen Ramonda from Black Panther. Now, I decided that she should be at this point before I'd even seen Wakanda Forever, but now even more so after that second film. She is incredible and does not get represented in merch enough. This wasn't a character that Eagle Moss did at all, so I've made sure I've included her at 121. And then at 122 it is Rescue from Avengers Endgame, which is easily the biggest omission in the entire Eagle Moss collection. God knows why they didn't do it. I mean, there's no actor likeness there, it's ridiculous. But this version, which is actually by Luis Cantos, looks perfect, scales really well, and looks really nice on display with the other heroes from the Endgame final battle. And at issue 123, what I like to do is go back to phase 1 and phase 2 just here and there to keep up the variety of the collection. So I've actually decided to go back to the first Avenger and include Timothy Dum Dum Dugan from the Howling Commandos. And Eagle Moss actually did a really good job with this figure, so aside from make it much later on in the collection, I've made no changes here. And at issue 124 it is Thor from Avengers Endgame. Now I've changed a few things here. The main difference is I've got rid of Mjolnir, and there was a good reason for that. That's because I've given it to Cap, because having the two next to each other both holding the same hammer but in different scales, very weird. So for this one I've kept the bulk, I've kept the cape, I've kept the face and the new beard and everything, but I've had it so he's just got a massive awesome Stormbreaker and no Mjolnir, so that he looks great alongside Cap and eventually Iron Man, which you'll see in a bit. And at issue 125 it is MJ from Spider-Man Far From Home. This is actually one of my favourite edits that I've done. I think it looks the most like a 1/16 Eagle Moss figure would look. Unfortunately, because of licensing, Eagle Moss never included her or any Spider-Man characters in their collection from the Tom Holland films, but she's such an important character, especially in the second and third one, that I absolutely had to include her here, and I think including the mace makes her that little bit more interesting, and it matches the Disney Store version of the character, which is what I used as a base for making this. And at issue 126 it is Taserface from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I haven't made any changes here. This is the original Eagle Moss one, but I have moved him much later on in the collection because he's a cool looking character but not a fan favourite, so it's good to use him as one of those, you know, darting backwards and forwards between old films kind of characters. So I'm glad I've included him, but I wouldn't have done him as early on as Eagle Moss did. They did him before even Mantis was included, which was ridiculous. And at issue 127, much the same, we're now going to Thor Ragnarok and including Meek, which is an awesome looking character, a very unique looking character, and no actor likeness here for obvious reasons, and yet Eagle Moss still didn't put Meek in their version of the collection, which I think is a massive missed opportunity. He will look awesome with Korg. I've used Luis Cantos' version of Meek here for this image, but yeah, I would absolutely include him, especially as we're getting towards the end of the collection. And at issue 128 we're back to Avengers Endgame with one of the core Avengers, which is Black Widow. Now I think a moment of silence for the version that Eagle Moss attempted to do, which was just so bad. So I didn't really take any of that. I started completely from scratch. I found, I think this is one of the either Mafex or SH Figure Arts figures. I've probably pronounced that wrong, but yeah, this is how she should have looked. The likeness is good, the new hair, the new outfit, looking really cool. And this is exactly what should have been in the collection, not this weird kind of leaning over. I'm not even going to try and describe the other one, you can see it for yourself. And as we've reached a multiple of 8, that means it is time for a special, and the 16th special in my version is identical to the one Eagle Moss did, which is Thanos from Avengers Endgame in full armour with full sword. They did a really good job with this one, so I haven't made any changes, and this feels like the right time to introduce him just at the end here, to go with all of the Avengers that are going to face up against him. And at issue 129, it is Minerva from Captain Marvel. So many different films included in these last 20. I was really pleased that I managed to do that. The only change I've made here is I've correctly painted the emblem on her chest, which should be silver. Eagle Moss just forgot to paint it, so that was a nice easy change to make. I've corrected that and otherwise kept her the same and moved her a little bit later on to stop those Captain Marvel ones from being so bunched up. And at issue 130, it is Ultron Mark I from Avengers Age of Ultron. Now, this was one of the few times that Eagle Moss surprised me with an interesting choice that no one was really asking for, but did it really well. It looked really good. So actually, to honour that, I have included it in my version of the collection as well at issue 130, because it just looks really, really cool, and is not a double that I was angry to get at all. I think this is a really, really smart move. And now as we hit the final 10, it's issue 131, which I've chosen the Supreme Intelligence from Captain Marvel. Now this isn't one that Eagle Moss gave us, presumably because Annette Bening's likeness was just too expensive for them perhaps, but I often say that there were too many Captain Marvel ones in the collection, but in my version, rather than a repeat of Carol Danvers or giving Goose his own issue or putting out some of the Star Force members but not all of them, I thought the more interesting thing to do is to put out one of the more different looking characters that was really, really important to the film, both as the Supreme Intelligence and as Carol's mentor. And at issue 132 we have Eric Killmonger from Black Panther. Now this is a repeat, but there's nothing wrong with repeats if you do them right, and this is definitely a good opportunity to do one. So we've had him in his Panther suit in my version of the collection, but we haven't yet had him as his regular self as Michael B. Jordan. And Eagle Moss did the same thing, but they did the two issues a handful of releases apart, and before any other characters in Black Panther as well, they did him twice, which was absolutely not the right way to go about it. They also didn't include the likeness, which was a shame. They just covered it with the mask, even though the digital sculptor included the likeness in the original design. So they made a lot of poor decisions with theirs, but I like to think I've corrected a few of those and made it a bit more interesting by moving him far on in the collection. And at issue 133, we're going back to Phase 2, Guardians of the Galaxy, one last time to do Corpsman Day, portrayed in the film by John C. Reilly, brilliant character. And this one is actually the Nova Corps soldier, the generic one that Eagle Moss did, just with John C. Reilly's likeness on. That's the only change I've made, and it just elevates the figure so much, having an actual character with a name and that takes part in the film, rather than just a mindless grunt that could be anyone. So that's the change I've made here, and I've also bumped him towards the end, because as I say, I like going backwards and forwards between the phases at the end here. And then at issue 134, it's back to Avengers Endgame with Valkyrie in her Valkyrie armour. Now, I've used the Marvel Legends figure as inspiration for this particular one, but Eagle Moss essentially, if you remember, did her in her armour from Ragnarok, and then did her again in her Scrapper uniform, and that was a really weird way of doing it, and the armoured one that they did ended up being one of the worst ones in the collection. So I've fixed that. I did her as the Scrapper from Ragnarok ages and ages ago, and now we've got her from a different film, from Endgame, and yeah, so much better, and I'd really love to have seen this one in the collection. Issue 135 is Bill Foster from Ant-Man and the Wasp, because I thought it would be nice to have an extra character, and Lawrence Fishburne is a great actor, and it was nice to see him in the collection. This one I have not changed. Aside from adding the Ant-Man logo to the base, it's the same character in the same issue number. I actually agree with Eagle Moss on this one, so here he is at the end, finishing off the Ant-Man and the Wasp lineup. And at issue 136, it is Spider-Man from Spider-Man Far From Home in his Night Monkey outfit, or the black suit, the stealth suit, whatever you want to call it, that S.H.I.E.L.D. give him. And honestly, I think Spider-Man and Iron Man are probably the two characters where you can do as many outfits as possible and no one will ever be upset. So I thought it would be nice to kind of widen the scope for Far From Home figures to include him in this outfit as well. And the inspiration for this picture is Luis Cantos' figure, which he was selling a couple of years back. Really love this one, and I'm glad I managed to squeeze it into the collection towards the end. And then we've reached our final special for the first 140 issues, and this is completely new, this one, Iron Patriot from Avengers Endgame with Rocket on his shoulder. Now, this actually does a few things. One, it's really cool. Like, it's a really cool suit. It's very unique. There's lots of bulk, and it would make a brilliant special. And I think Eagle Moss missed a massive trick not including this suit in the collection at all. But the other thing it does is it releases a couple of spots for other characters, because they did War Machine in the black suit from Endgame, which wasn't really that iconic, and they also did Rocket standing on a bit of rubble. By moving both characters into this one special, that also freed up a couple of slots for other characters elsewhere. Issue 137 is Captain Marvel from Avengers Endgame. I've kept this one exactly the same as Eagle Moss did. I thought this was a really good sculpt and taken from a moment straight from the film, and really good paintwork as well. And the only change I've made is pushing her right to the end to free up the space between the first time we saw her in my version of the collection and this time, just for a bit more variety. But otherwise, I've kept her the same. And at issue 138, it is Aunt May from Spider-Man Homecoming. I thought she's such an important character to Peter Parker, and you never really see her in any merch or figures or whatever, so I thought it'd be nice to include her. Marissa Tomei is an amazing actress as well, so I've picked her from Homecoming, as she kind of does more in that film. In Far From Home she kind of stays while Peter goes on holiday, so it made more sense to do her from Homecoming. And yeah, I've squeezed her in just at the end of the collection. In fact, she's kind of the last side character before we have the final two, and I've made those really, really special. So, final side character, Aunt May. So, the final two characters in the collection, I thought it was really important to go out with a bang, to close it properly, unlike Eagle Moss did. So, issue 139, Iron Man Mark 85 from Avengers Endgame, and rather than using the concept art image that Eagle Moss went for that isn't accurate at all, I went for the definitive Tony Stark pose, the iconic snap moment from the end of Endgame when he saves the universe. What a great way to go out on for the collection. And this is Luis Cantos' version once again, just to kind of show how awesome this issue could have looked, and it would bring it to a close so nicely. I love this figure. And then, how can you top Mark 85 snapping Iron Man? Well, you can do Stan Lee as the final issue at 140. So we've gone through the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, Phase 1, 2 and 3, and how else could you finish it off than by paying tribute to the granddaddy of it all, Stan Lee? And by this point he would have also passed away, so this would be kind of a great way to remember him as well. So I would have finished on issue 140. Of course, Eagle Moss didn't even do Stan Lee. But I think this is the perfect way to end what would have been a really, really strong version of the collection. But wait, there's more. There's a few loose ends to tie up that a couple of people have mentioned, so I just wanted to include these as well. So firstly, bonus figures. If I were in charge of the collection, what I would do is I would do a small bonus figure every time that there is an extension, to encourage people to carry on collecting through the extension. Now, I think that's a smart business decision, but it's not something that Eagle Moss ever did. So for these, obviously, the first run, 1 to 80, you get Rocket Raccoon from Guardians of the Galaxy, which is what Eagle Moss did. And then from the extension 81 to 120, I've included Cosmo from Guardians of the Galaxy, who is about to come back in Guardians 3 with an even bigger role. So that was a nice bit of forward thinking from me. And then the final extension, issues 121 through to 140, I included Howard the Duck from Avengers Endgame, sporting a massive gun. This is actually another Luis Cantos figure, which is why it looks as good as it does. And I just think adding these three in makes it gives us some small characters that we wouldn't have got otherwise. And I think using the extensions as the reason to give people these would have been a really smart move, which unfortunately Eagle Moss didn't do. And then we've also got the premium armours, and these were sent out to premium subscribers, so anyone that paid an extra £1 per issue, they also got one of these every 16 issues or so. And I've kept the first ones the same, but I have changed a few of them because I think Eagle Moss picked some of the more boring suits towards the end. So starting off with Stryker, as Eagle Moss did, a great suit, and then moving on to Heartbreaker, and then Bones, which is one of my favourite Iron Man suits, and Star Boost. So those were the first four that Eagle Moss did, and I haven't changed a thing there. But the fifth one, I have put Hammerhead, a very different colour and a very different style of suit, and a lot more bulk, which I think would have been more interesting. And then next up I chose Hot Rod, which isn't the most interesting shaped suit, but everyone just loves that paint job, and it was done in Marvel Legends, it's been done at Hot Toys, like a lot of people really like that suit, so that would have made a lot of sense. And then the penultimate suit, Red Snapper, just because it is so extra. There's, those appendages on the arms are really unique, and it looks nothing like any other suit in the Tony Stark armory, so that would have been really cool. And then finally, Igor as the 8th premium armor. Now, in my opinion, Igor was the biggest surprise. The thing that Eagle Moss actually did the best was realizing a special sized premium at no extra cost. Very uncharacteristic for them, but they did, so I've included it as the final premium armor, something for collectors to aspire towards at the end, to round off the set of 8 that people that paid that extra £1 could have got. And that was it. We have reached the end. 140 issues, 16 specials, 3 bonus editions and 8 premium armors. those were the characters that I would have put in the Marvel movie collection. Now, a lot of overlap with Eaglemoss, but a lot of changes as well, and a lot of new characters too. Thank you so much for following this series. I've really enjoyed it. All that's left to do is just take a quick look at the whole lot together, just to kind of see how much this has been spread between the films. And so we have a look at Phase 1, Iron Man kicking it off with Ironmonger, Stain and the Mark 1 armour, and then a couple from Incredible Hulk, which obviously Eaglemoss didn't do at all, and then a few from Iron Man 2, including Whiplash, which was badly missing from the original, and then the Thor film, mainly focusing on villains and side characters, because we've got the other characters coming up later. The same goes for the first Captain America, just focusing on World War II specific characters, and then quite a few more from the iconic first Avengers film. And then Phase 2, obviously Iron Man 3 is absolutely packed because of the addition of those premium armours, but I've also included Happy and Pepper as well to help round that off. Then Thor the Dark World, which is pretty similar to how Eaglemoss did it. I've just added Jane really, otherwise that was a really strong set. Winter Soldier, I've expanded to include Batroc and Alexander Pierce, which I think have really kind of fleshed that film out a little bit more. Guardians of the Galaxy is absolutely stacked, which is unsurprising given just how many new characters were in that film and also just how much I love it really. Age of Ultron has quite a few, focusing on new characters that we haven't had from previous films rather than repeats, and 3 for Ant-Man as well. The first half of Phase 3 is absolutely packed, just like when Eaglemoss did it, but I've tweaked Civil War to focus again on appearances of new characters, and then Doctor Strange I've kept the same as Eaglemoss did, but I've added the logos to the base. And then Guardians Volume 2 is very different. I've kind of been a bit more inventive with it. So we've got Rocket with Baby Groot, we've got Gamora saved for this one, Stakar, Yondu with the big fin, which I think there was a lot more they could have done with that film that I've done here. Spider-Man Homecoming goes without saying. Eaglemoss didn't even have the license for that one, so that's all new that I've included there. Thor Ragnarok is packed, but then again there were just so many characters in that film and they all look really strong. And the same goes for Black Panther. Never underestimate just how much world building the first Black Panther did for the MCU. So many new characters, all with very unique looks. And I've included actually more than Eaglemoss did there, just to kind of give them all their chance to shine. And then the second half of Phase 3, understandably, is mostly dominated by Infinity War and Endgame, but there was also room for Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I've included more actor likenesses there because Eaglemoss has some weird vendetta against likenesses for Ant-Man figures. Captain Marvel, I've shrunk down a little bit, but also included the Supreme Intelligence and merged Nick Fury and Goose together. And Far From Home, obviously Eaglemoss didn't have that license either, so I've kind of put 4 figures in there that they didn't do at all. But yeah, the big Avengers films, lots of new outfits here that I think people wanted, but also new villains, and just kind of giving people the characters as repeats that they would want, and not doing it for the sake of it, doing it because people really like that outfit, or really like that character's role in the film. And then just at the end there, Stan Lee rounding the whole thing off. He doesn't come from a particular film, so he's just going to hover there, making a little cameo on the final slide. Wow, that was a lot of talking. Thank you so much, everyone, if you've listened this long or followed all the way through on Instagram and had a look at these images and things. This was originally a project just for me to have some fun with a bit of Photoshop and the Marvel movie collection, but people have really enjoyed it and I've had so many messages and things, so thank you so much for supporting this project. It's not the end. I am doing lots of Marvel Legends projects at the moment, but I'll also be back to the Marvel movie collection again. Maybe I'll continue this, maybe I'll extend it and show what it could have been like if it hadn't been cancelled. Maybe Black Widow, Shang-Chi in Phase 4 and things, and see what that could have looked like. Let me know in the comments if that's something you want to see. As always, you can follow me on Instagram at MMCFan. I've just hit 7,000 followers on there, so thank you very much. I'm also on Facebook, Marvel Movie Collection Fans, and you've got to subscribe right here on YouTube if you want to see more things just like this. It's a really good way to hear me talk a little bit more behind the scenes about these things that I make, rather than just look at the images. Anyway, I'll stop talking now and I'll let you get on with your day. Thanks so much for watching. Keep on collecting.